Hey, how you doing, everybody? It's Bad Brad, and I wake up early these mornings, and sometimes an idea pops right into my head, and other times I have to kind of think about it a little bit. But today, I thought I'd talk about the greatest live performance by a guitar player that I ever witnessed. Now, I'll preface this with saying that I've seen some amazing guitar players, and I've been very lucky, as probably a lot of you out there have been as well, to come from a generation where we saw so many great players, and often at a crazy affordable price. Now, I got to see the great Stevie Ray Vaughan on a triple bill. It was The Alarm first, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and then The Pretenders, all on one bill at William and Mary Hall. That was a great concert, and I'll always remember that, getting to hear Stevie Ray Vaughan. But his performance was exactly what I expected it to be. Oftentimes, when you see someone and you're not expecting it to be incredible, or you had no idea what you were about to see, is when you're most surprised. And adding to the list of great guitar players, James Burton with Elvis Presley, Steve Lukather. I saw Steve Lukather in the baked potato, literally a few feet away from him. I saw Michael Landau at the Underdog in East Nashville just recently, like last year. And that was incredible. That was mind-blowing. And I wasn't even able to see anything but the top of his head. An occasional glimpse peeked through a crowd. It was crowded and standing room only. And that was like a religious experience, hearing Landau. I wanna hear from my fellow compadres on this channel. Tell me about your favorite guitar player live experience. But the one experience that really blew me away, besides Eddie Van Halen, who I saw on the 5150 tour, and that was a great performance. He was still in really good form, maybe even a little more polished form than he had been earlier in his career. Besides seeing that, besides seeing Stevie Ray Vaughan, besides seeing Landau, besides seeing James Burton, the guitar player for the Pretenders was an incredible guitar player. And, I've seen some amazing shows, and those are just the ones that pop into the top of my head. But I'm sure, seeing George Lynch, back in the early 90s, great player. But the one that really blew me away, and I forget exactly what year this was, and if you people out there know in the comments, please let me know. Steely Dan decided to go on the road after the Gaucho album, and essentially breaking up then, and Donald Fagen going solo for a few albums, and this long period where they essentially didn't exist. And I had been a huge Steely Dan fan, in addition to all my other stuff that I listened to, the Jimi Hendrix and the Van Halen and this and that. Steely Dan would be my, really contemplative music that I would listen to. And, for a long time, it seemed like this mystery music that, I'd never be able to fully understand or play. Now I, pull up a chord chart and I'm good to go. But man, that music was so important to me, and I hadn't spent any time learning any of the solos, or it just seemed unattainable. It seemed like it was out of my reach. But I've since learned. You can see on this channel, Third World Man, and I learned the great Larry Carlton solo on Kid Charlemagne. But when they decided to go back out on the road, I was still out in California. So this had to have been, maybe 93 or early 94 or even 92. Let me know in the comments. But they went on the road and we went up. I want to say it was north of LA. I believe it's Shoreline Amphitheater. I'm not sure exactly which show we went to, but it was feeling like maybe a little northwest of LA, and we got tickets, and tickets were not cheap. I mean, by that time, I think maybe we spent maybe $600 total. We had seats that were on the floor, like not too far from the front. And we went to the concert, and they came out. And without Donald Fagen and without Walter Becker on stage, the guitar player playing that show blew my mind. The guitar player's name was Drew Zing. Zingg. And what he played, they were doing like a medley of like probably some of the songs they weren't going to play in the set. And he was playing the melody on some of it and taking little solos, and the guitar tone was incredible. When you think of a Dumble type tone. Now, I know he wasn't using a Dumble amp. I believe he was using a matchless. But man, his picking and the way he would articulate his notes, the tastefulness in what he was playing and how he was playing it just absolutely blew my mind. And I sat there mesmerized. Now, by the time we had spent that much money for tickets, we didn't have a lot of money to be drinking tons of beers, and so I was about as sober as could possibly be. I believe they did an intermission at some point, or maybe it was before the show, but there was a middle-aged lady, and I was probably about 26 at the time, and I was in full heavy metal mode, so I had my long permed hair, and and I was there with my girlfriend at the time, and there was a middle-aged lady, and she was well, you guys like Steely Dan? And I'm like, yes, I love Steely Dan. Everybody, and she's like, oh, that's so great. Oh, well, glad to have you here. She was like a patron. She was like somebody that was, just glad to see these young kids enjoying some good music. And so she came back from the concession stand, and she brought us each a beer. I was just like, oh, this is just like incredible. But getting back to Drew Zing, I was just the whole time, and Walter Becker would play some solos, but his tone, he was still like in rack mode, and his tone was all slathered in delay and reverb, and it was just, it wasn't, when Drew Zing would play, it would just be like this, just articulate, tasteful, Dumble-esque tone with his 335, and I believe he had some kind of Strat that he would play on a few songs. and it's like the earth would part and the clouds would disappear, and it was just a revelation. And I thought, at the time, I'm like, I am gonna follow this guy. I am gonna listen to every note this guy puts out. This is my new guy. This is like my new Larry Carlton, because I felt like what he was doing on that gig was kind of what Larry did, but taking it a little bit to the next level. I was hearing him superimpose triads over these Steely Dan chord changes, and I could hear what he was doing because I had studied some out of a Frank Gambale book, and playing arpeggios out of a scale instead of just playing the scale, going across in fourths with arpeggios, and what a cool sound when I was hearing him do some stuff like that. And but then the Steely Dan chord changes added another twist to the equation. And man, I just said, man, I just tried, when I would go to a concert like that, I would just try to absorb everything I could. I just wanted to remember every moment. It was kind of like when I went to see Mike Stern with Michael Brecker. I was just sitting there just trying to absorb it. And same with when I got to see Miles Davis. But man, it was just so incredible. And back then we didn't have the internet, so I had no idea who this guy was or who was in the band when I went to see Steely Dan. And so after I moved to Nashville, I decided to I was going on a road trip to Virginia, and I saw Steely Dan was playing at Wolf Trap, and I thought, oh man, I gotta go see Drew Zing, man. Gotta go see him again. So I got some tickets out in the back with a friend of mine, and we went to the show, and it was a different guitar player. And come to find out, I forget, it was the tour that had it had Dennis Chambers on drums. Previously with Drew Zing, it was Peter Erskine. But I forget who this famous guitar player is. Let me know in the comments. And it was good, but it was not the life-changing moment that Drew Zing was. It was not the epitome of what you needed to play on a Steely Dan gig and the tone you needed to have, but just take ratcheting up another level. And so I was disappointed, man. And that was a valuable lesson to learn that, you can be like the star of the show, and you can be the best thing on stage, and the next season you're gone. Somebody else is in your spot. And I was like, why did they do that? And for years, I was just like, man. And I would, they put out a live album, Steely Dan Live in America or whatever. And there are some Drew Zing moments on there. And also, if you want to hear more Drew Zing, the Rock and Soul Review, Drew Zing is all over that with some killer solos. But nothing for me topped that moment. And I believe the video is on, was it Shoreline Amphitheater in California? I'm not sure. But I found some video footage from that tour, and I go back and listen and just go, man, this guy, he's up there with this beret on, and he's just amazing. Now Drew Zing is still playing, and he does some gigs. I saw recently with like a Steely Dan tribute act, and they get Keith Carlick on drums and Skunk Baxter, and they go and play these tunes, but nothing can take you back to that moment in time when it was just perfection. And I felt like, what a tragedy that they felt the need to change, and felt that maybe this guy was getting too much attention, or I don't know if anybody knows the inside information, but man, it was the greatest performance I'd ever seen of anybody on guitar. And man, I had just recently seen Robin Ford play a little small club in Nashville, and that was incredible, and that was a real dumble. But for me, it still didn't top Drew Zing. Now, I would love to have Drew Zing on this channel, so if he watches this video, hey Drew, reach out to me. I'd love to interview you. Man, incredible player. And man, I felt like it was such a huge loss to Steely Dan. Yeah, they've got a great guitar player now, and he's had the gig for eons. But for me, it's still Drew Zing. Thanks so much for watching.